Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lurking for Legends. Lurking for Legends is a live video cast where Christy, Dave, and myself talk to people from all walks of the publishing world. And during the show, and even afterward, we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or comment on what you hear on the show. And tonight, we're excited to have with us urban fantasy and supernatural thriller author JP McLean. Welcome, JP.
Thank you.
And before we get started, for those of us who may not know who you are, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Well, I am a full-time writer. I've been writing full-time since 2012. Since before that, actually, 2012 is when the first book came out. I have 8 full-length novels written in 2 series and 1 novella and several short stories. And I live on the west coast of British Columbia on a little tiny island, one of the northern Gulf Islands. And I am thrilled to be here today.
And we're glad to have you, JP. So you said you've been writing for quite a long time. So how did you actually get started in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was the weather that turned me to writing. I had just spent 5 years in the sunny South. So my husband and I traveled with his work, and we spent a year in Mexico in a little town, and we spent a year in the Baja. And then we spent 3 years in Tucson, Arizona. So we were just home from that travel back on the West Coast, which is often referred to as the wet coast. And the weather had set in and the rain was hitting the window sideways. And I was wondering what on earth I was going to do with myself that first winter back. And I had been reading a lot of urban fantasy and just fell in love with the genre and thought, I'm going to try my hand at this. So I did. I sat there while hockey was playing and my husband was enjoying a hockey game, and I typed out a scene that I had in my head, dreams that I have where I can fly. It's a common dream. I'm not nuts. It's a common dream. And so I did the scene of this woman taking off from a deck and flying down the coast. And I enjoyed it so much that I just kept picking away at it and picking away at it. I thought to myself, well, she's not just going to jump off the deck. She knows she can fly. And if she knows she can fly, well, how did that happen? Was she born with that ability, or did somebody give it to her? And so the story just grew and grew and grew. And then it turned into the first book of the Gift Legacy, which is Secret Sky. And after I finished writing that book, I just couldn't let these characters go. So I started writing a second book. And originally I had thought it was a one-off book. So the book is complete and finished. And then I continued on with some characters. The same character goes through the main book. And then Hidden Enemy was the second book. And when I was writing Hidden Enemy, I knew I had a trilogy. So I started calling it the Gift Trilogy. And then a 4th book came out, and that blew the trilogy out of the water. And then book 5 and book 6. And then I decided to take book 1 and rewrote that from a man's perspective, from the protagonist's lover's perspective. And so then I've got the mirror book. So I've got Secret Sky, and then Lover Betrayed is his take on that whole story. And then I can't stop writing. It's turned into a bad habit.
So there's quite an evolution from the first one to the later ones.
Yeah, and the first series is pretty squarely in the urban fantasy realm. The last couple of books are probably pushing a little more thriller-esque because they get into pretty fast motion, pretty fast-paced, and lots of action scenes and guns and fighting and such, which is pretty unusual for Canadian. And then in the new series, Bloodmark, which the first book that just came out in October, that one is very much supernatural thriller. It's gritty, tons of fun. Another fast-paced book, and I'm just writing the sequel to that now. I'll probably have 3 books in that series, I think.
So when you say supernatural thriller, what is it? What elements constitute it being supernatural?
Supernatural is in this particular book. She's born with these blood red birthmarks that snake around her body, and the birthmarks start to disappear. So that's one element of it, because birthmarks clearly don't just disappear. So it's the whole story behind how she got these marks and why they're disappearing. And she has these debilitating dreams, and during these dreams, she's in a paralytic sleep, so she can't wake up. But the dreams take her back in time. And when she's back in time, at first she's just a fly on the wall. And then she starts to get translucent. Her body becomes translucent, and then it becomes solid. So she's actually back in time. So that's the supernatural element of this latest series. And the thriller component is simply because it is very fast. There is lots of suspense going on, and you want to know what happens. And of course, people are dying. So
that's interesting. I always wonder what the supernatural part would be in these books. I'm a fantasy author, so we can add anything we want in our books. So.
Well, that's the funny thing about fantasy. So I do a lot of hand selling. I go to markets and such and sell books. And the question I get asked more than anything else is, what is fantasy? And explaining to people, what I think of as fantasy. There's the high fantasy, which I believe is the kind of writing that you do, Richard.
Yes.
So that high fantasy, the J.R.R. Tolkien, the George R.R. Martin, R's, that kind of fantasy versus low fantasy, which is my fantasy, is low. It's in the here and now. It's you could be my neighbor, but you can fly. It's not necessarily vampires or werewolves or zombies, but they're just people like you and I that are plunked down in the middle of society. So it's really difficult to explain that to people. And oftentimes what I end up saying is, think of Superman or Batman. That's kind of the best analogy I can give people, that they can grasp and understand what it is that I write if they're not familiar with the fantasy genre. But so many of the other, I talk about contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy, low fantasy, high fantasy. Then there's the magical realism and paranormal. It's a very big topic.
Oh, for sure. Fantasy's probably got to have the most subgenres there is out there, just because anything can be fantasy as long as it's not pure science fiction.
Yeah.
Or just pure fiction that takes place in our world. So as soon as you put any kind of supernatural element into it, it now becomes some kind of fantasy for sure. And I've always debated, people ask me, is there a difference between high fantasy and epic fantasy? And I would say I'm more epic fantasy than high fantasy. And I think the only thing that differentiates those two genres is George R. R. Martin, I think, is more high fantasy, because I think he delves into the battle of the houses and whereas an epic fantasy is more of a quest-driven fantasy where they start going across lands. And I know they do that in Game of Thrones, but it's still all about the politics. Whereas Tolkien is not really about the politics; it's more about them trying to save the land. So I think there's a subtle difference between high and epic, but not a big line.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And you could break it down even further. Like people that write paranormal, they too have paranormal, I was going to say the romance. There's paranormal romance. There's the paranormal that's got the vampires in it, the paranormal that doesn't have the vampires in it. It's a big realm.
I just finished the fourth book in a series of my own, and that in a similar fashion to your books, that originally started off as a standalone, and then kind of grew and blossomed and so on. And I kind of like at one time I thought that was going to be a trilogy, and then, well, long story, but my wife kind of messed it up. And so I reworked the third book and then added a fourth to make up for what had happened in the third. But I got to the point with the last book where I was kind of like, I was having a fight to kind of like keep things going, because, it's like when you've had the same characters through so many different books, you kind of like gone through all these different sort of like circumstances and different plots and so on. I was struggling to find something new to kind of like write, and so after the fourth one, I kind of said, okay, that's it. I'm not going to write anymore, at least for now, kind of thing. So how do you actually kind of like keep yours going for so long, for 6 books? I mean, that's a lot of books.
It is. I wrote the first 4 books, and then I took the break and wrote the 7th, which was the story from a different character's perspective. And that helped because it kind of gave me about a year off of thinking about the progression of the book and just rewriting how that first book happened from someone else's perspective. When I finished the 6th book, I left some doors open. I wanted to finish it because I needed to write something different, but I left some doors open so I could continue writing. But it may have just been the cast of characters, because each book focuses on the main character and one other. So in the first book, she has one fellow that she's interested in. That falls apart. In the second book, there's another fellow that she's interested in. That falls apart. And then in the third book, she settles on some guy that takes her through the rest of the books. And then the people that are the ones in charge of these people who can fly, the police sort of for the group that can fly, that group gets more and more sinister throughout the series. So throwing in these other elements that impact the main characters helped bring it along, because at first it's just, a group that, makes sure that the flyers don't get out of hand and don't use their gifts to the detriment of the people that don't have gifts. And then you find out, well, there's corruption in that group. And then it's trying to figure out who's the corrupt people, or who are the corrupt people, and how to get them out of there and how to turn that organization around. So there were a lot of other elements that I could bring in that felt very natural to the story. And when the 6th book wraps everything up, like I said, there are still some little tiny windows that I can open up and explore a few of the other characters that I didn't get time in the book to do. I like some of the stories, like the one I'm thinking of is J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood. She takes one character in each book and tells that character's story completely. And then in the next book, she takes another character and tells that character's story. But the first character's in the background. They're walking back and forth to the kitchen. So you still see them in the story. So that's what I did here. Like the main character is definitely the main character throughout, but the focus is on a different character in each of the stories as you go through. So it's just a matter of throwing enough people in there to keep it interesting.
So that means you have plans for more books in the Gift Legacy series? Or?
I think there's probably one more book. There's one character I get asked about a lot. The character that initially gifted her ability to fly, and that is a woman by the name of Jolene Reynolds. And I never did tell her story. And nobody knows if she's alive or dead. So that would be an interesting story to tell. And I think there would be interest in that one.
So to put you on the spot, and I know as an author, when I have different characters and storylines and stuff, sometimes I don't flesh them out because they're not important to what I'm writing. Do you know if that person's alive or dead?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I've got notes.
Some characters that, they're just in there for whatever, and then they're gone again, and people ask me about them, and I really don't have an answer for them. I say, well, no spoilers, but I haven't got a clue.
Well, you can kind of figure if I'm going to be writing her story that maybe.
Yes, if you're going to write a story for sure,
yeah. Mind you, I wouldn't start the story from where it left off. I would start the story back further so that people understood how she got to the point she got to where she would give this gift of flight away. And the thing about those characters is when you give your gift away, or if somebody steals it from you, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to die in the process. So people don't know whether she's alive or not, or why she would take that chance, or why she would even do that. So that's a story to be told. And we do hear a little bit of it from her family throughout that series, but we don't hear her take on it. So that might be
this character.
So speaking about your gift of flight, you must have a gift of flight because you have in your little write-up that we had about you that you live on an island called Denman Island off the coast of British Columbia. And
Yep.
I Google mapped that, and there are no bridges from Denman Island to either Vancouver Island or British Columbia. So
There are no bridges.
what is life like on a small island?
It's quiet. This is a rural island. There are 1,100 people in the last census, probably 1,200 by now. It's 50 square kilometers, 20 square miles. So it's a small island. You can drive across it in 10 minutes and you can drive from north to south in about 20 minutes, although there aren't roads that go all the way to the north and to the south. Lots and lots of farmland. So there are few communities that are houses side by side, but mostly it's countryside, farms. Across the street are cows and lambs, and we're coming into lambing season, and that's the best time to be here because you can hear the lambs from our house and walk across the street, and these darling little things are jumping up and down, the little lambs. They're so sweet. And then when you go on walks, you see spotted pigs and chickens and horses and cows. It's just lovely rural place. Horrible roads, gotta say. I drove to the north end today to go for a walk with a girlfriend. The car is just rattling along on these terrible, terrible, terrible roads. I honestly think that maybe we're not paying enough taxes, and that's kind of a joke. But really, we need better roads here. And there's no bridge. It's a ferry dependent island. So we're connected to the main Vancouver Island, which is a huge island. We're connected by the longest saltwater cable ferry in the world. It's still only a 10-minute ride on the ferry, but it is, somebody says they want to live here. Yeah, it's a nice place. And there's tons of writers here. There's a ton of writers here. There's a couple of different writers groups, and there's a writers festival every year. And we get, yeah.
So let me get this straight. Your cable goes to Vancouver Island, your ferry. So if you want to go to Vancouver, you're taking two ferries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You have to get off this island to the Vancouver Island at Buckley Bay is the name of the little town. And then you drive south for about an hour until you get to Nanaimo. And then from Nanaimo, you take a ferry to Vancouver.
Right. Well, that's a longer crossing for sure.
Yeah, that's an hour-and-a-half crossing. And ours is just 10 minutes. It's a short little one.
On your walk north today, I was Googling it, and Long Beach Point looks like quite a neat place to be. But looks like it's quite a walk in there if you actually want to hit the beachhead. Yeah.
Yeah. And the north end too, a lot of it is not, you can go down, did you see the little Morningside beach? The stairs are, stairs are like that.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's straight down and it'll take you out to Sandy Point or Sandy Island. At low tide, you can get out to that little island. There are such a lot of little trails through here. I think the local people have done a great job of donating money in order to take land and make it public and parkland and lots of areas where you can go, and you don't have to do the same trail twice in 2 weeks. You can take easily, and it's a small island, so that's saying something. And the beaches are funny too, because the beach outside our house is shale rock. So at this time of year, it's hard to walk on. It's very slippery. You could fall and break your neck. Other parts, like Falongley Beach, are long sandy beaches. So all the way around, the beaches are different.
That's funny.
So I was looking up your books on Goodreads, and I noticed that you have a lot of very good reviews for your books, which obviously as an author is always nice. But I was just kind of like wondering, as someone who hasn't got quite so many reviews, have we got any tips on how to get more?
I ask anybody who buys books from me at markets if they enjoy it, to please leave a review. Maybe that's it. I don't say if you don't enjoy it, leave a review. So if you enjoy it, leave a review. But I also use review services. So I use a company called Booksprout, and I also use a company called Hidden Gems. And either of those companies will allow you for a cost to sign up with them, and they will offer your book to their readership, and their readership will guarantee a review. You're not guaranteed a good review, but they will say you'll get 20 reviews or you'll get 10 reviews, however many you sign up for. And that's been a really good service to get you started, because usually I think the statistic is for about 100 people that read your book, one will leave a review. And that takes a long time to build up reviews. So I do try to get some ahead of the game. And I also have a publicist, and he's pretty good about getting reviews for my book. So that helps.
Yeah, reviews are tough, that's for sure. So I also see on your website that you're a blogger.
I do have a blog. I try to put a post up once a month. I haven't done this month.
And what are the blogs about? Like, are they just writing in general, or are they life in general?
Yeah, life in general. I like to think that, when I go to an author's website, what I want to see is a little bit about who they are. What's their day-to-day life? What are they working on? What are their hobbies? That kind of thing. So that's what my website's usually, just what's happening in my life this month. Have I read a book I really enjoy? Is there a sale going on for somebody else's books that you might enjoy? I also send a newsletter out. With my newsletter subscribers, I do give them all of my short stories for free. So every 2 or 3 weeks, they'll get a free short story. But again, it's just trying to connect with readers and let them know a little bit about me. I have on my, like my name, for example, is Joanne, JO-ANNE. And when I first started writing, and the story's online on my website. But when I first started writing, I realized that people would never find me if they had to spell my name that way, because Joanne is spelled without the hyphen, without an E on the end. Sometimes it's got a capital A, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe that doesn't matter. But I just thought I'll simplify things and make it JP. So stuff like that I think people might find interesting, and I put that on the website. I put pictures of the lambs in the spring because I love them. I think they're so sweet. Little piglets, if I find them when I'm walking home. Not find them, but if I see them through the fences, I'll take pictures and put them on the website.
So we have a comment question from CJ. She says, what did you do prior to becoming a full-time writer?
Well, I traveled for 5 years with my husband, and prior to traveling, I worked in human resources. I worked for a hospital in Nanaimo, and prior to that, I worked for a school board in Burnaby on the mainland. Always human resources work, job evaluations, hiring. That's a fun job, hiring. More fun, retirement planning. That was my very favorite part of being an HR person. When someone was about to retire and they'd come in to see you, and they'd bring their wife or their family, and they were just smile ear to ear. They were just, okay, so it's next month, and they're filling out the forms to get their pension, and the best job ever.
I bet it would be, yeah. So I also found it interesting on your website, you have discussion questions. You've got a thing devoted to discussion questions. What do you use them for? And what inspired you to put them on the site in the first place?
What inspired me was reading other books that had discussion questions, because what I discovered with the questions was they got you thinking about the book in a different way. It's not just the story anymore. It becomes something that you're digging a little deeper into the story, and you're trying to get an answer to what motivates people. And I find that fascinating. So I put it in the back of books, also thinking that if a book club picked up the books and wanted to talk about it, it would give them a starting point to discuss the book. So all of the books, except for I didn't do it with the most recent book, but all of the Gift Legacy books have discussion questions in the back. And so I put them also on the website so that people could, if they wanted to, sometimes when you look at the discussion questions, it gives you a real good idea about the theme of the book. I just found it very, very interesting to do. And another fun thing to offer people too on the website. I put the first chapters of all the books up there as well, so people can download the PDF and read them if they're interested. Oftentimes you'll know just by reading a chapter whether the book is for you or not.
Yeah, for sure. I've got the first chapter of my books on my website. You just click on the cover and there it is, for sure. I tell people that when they look at my books and they're not sure, I just take a business card and look them up and click on the books tab and read the first chapter. If you like it, come on back and I'll sign them for you when you come back. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And do you find that people interact with those discussion questions, or how do you get feedback from that?
I haven't had feedback on the discussion questions. Interesting. Most of the questions and feedback I get come from interviews like this, discussions with other writers, and I think it's a curiosity point mainly. I'd be curious to know if other authors who use discussion questions get feedback on their discussion questions. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead,
I've
Dave.
never used them, so I couldn't give you any feedback on that. It sounds like an interesting idea, but yeah, it's like I have no idea. It's a completely new concept.
Oh, we had our guest last week, and they actually published a book for notes. So they included different scenes or pictures from their books in the series, the Deadwood series. And she actually published, I think it was about a 30 or 40 page little booklet that you can buy. So it's another thing to sell. And so people take notes. And I just discovered this recently because someone showed me I think she's from Texas, that she actually bought one of my books, and she's got all these tabs in my books. And geez, are those all the mistakes I missed? They were just different things that she was looking at and she's found interesting, and she was taking notes that way. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be really cool if you're actually invested in the writer to have a notebook from the writer with something to do with the series on the cover, and they can write little notes in there. And I thought, isn't that neat? I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is.
Yeah, I didn't either. I guess originally it was my editor who said to me, you should put a glossary in your books. And so I did that, and that's what kind of got me started along that path, because then I started looking and thought, well, a lot of books that I was reading had glossaries because they were the J.R. Ward books, for example, because she uses terminology that isn't common. And so it started off like that. And then I started seeing these discussion questions, and I thought, well, you could put those in there too, because, if people want to think a little deeper about the book, I mean, they don't have to, they can just read it and have fun with it. But sometimes the discussion questions do lead to interesting answers for people who, like my family, who are, if they get to the end of the book, they read every single word of the book, of course. And if I get any feedback, it would be from them.
I bet you also, as the writer, even though it's your story, it seems silly to say this, but you probably get to know your story better when you delve into and try to think of these questions and then how they would answer. Like, it's amazing how we can understand our stories more when we think of them in different ways.
It's true. It's true. Especially the motivation. I find that's probably the biggest factor that if you're just a casual reader, you don't necessarily give it a lot of thought. But when you are asked the question directly about, like Jolene character, one of the questions in the back of that book would be, why would she give this gift away? What are the things you can think of that would cause someone to do that? And so I think, okay, well, maybe there's a little more to this than the surface, scratching the surface. You can get a little more information or dive down a little deeper if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed, JP, you use Creative Edge publicity, is that right?
Yes, Mickey Nicholson.
I just wondered, could you perhaps talk about the impact that's had on your publicity and marketing efforts?
He's been fantastic, and the way I got introduced to him was through a Romance Writers of Calgary meeting. He was presenting there. He'd also presented at When Words Collide, a Calgary Writers Festival, which I'd gone to before, but for some reason I had never met him there or seen him there. And I got to the point in my career just before Bloodmark, a year before Bloodmark came out, and I there's one thing I hated doing, and that's the cold calls to podcasters and reviewers. I just didn't enjoy doing it. I dreaded doing it, but it's necessary. You do have to reach out, and you do have to, if you want your books to sell and people to get to know who you are, you have to be able to connect with the people that can get your word out there. And I wasn't doing a very good job of it. So I ended up hiring Mickey, and that's what he does for me. I don't do any of that anymore. He takes care of it. He sends me gigs, and I, do the ones that are a good fit. And he has got me reviews. He's got my name out there. I'm comfortable now doing interviews, whereas before I was just a nervous wreck. Now I'm comfortable talking about the books. Before I was not comfortable talking about the books. So he's really forced me to step up my game and taken over some of the responsibility for doing that. So it's been a very, very good experience for sure.
Sounds like the kind of guy I need to hire.
Yes, I highly recommend him. So I will send you the contact information.
Actually, yeah, that would be useful, because I'm kind of like the same as you. I hate that kind of stuff. It's like
yeah.
Oh,
I know feeling.
It's the same for a lot of writers. I mean, we all tend to be kind of like introverts, I think, and so yeah, those are the things that can like. If you
look on my website under the media tab, you'll find all of the events that I have done, and most of those events have been thanks to Mickey. And there are dozens of them. And when I had my book coming out, I was doing something pretty much every day, and some days twice a day. I would have an event in the morning and an event in the afternoon. And it's COVID, so I didn't leave home. I was doing the events from here. I had, as we all have, invested in, earbuds and ring lights, and I even have a green screen now. It's just crazy. Who'd have thunk?
So getting Mickey, is it kind of like pitching an agent? Is it something that he has to like what he's hearing, or how does that work?
You have a discussion with him. You need to make sure that his goals and your goals meet up, and what he's able to do for you is what you need done or want done. So you have a discussion with him, and I'm sure he doesn't take everyone on that comes his way. I think he's pretty particular to make sure that the books that he represents are at a certain level. But it's a discussion you have with him, and I think we all start off that way. I certainly had a discussion. I was on the phone just after I met him online at that webinar. I was on the phone with him for about an hour. I had done my research, questions to ask a publicist and what you need from a publicist. And we went through that sheet of questions, and he answered all of the questions and ticked all the right boxes. And I think he and I are probably a really good fit for what I need and what he's able to provide. And he's really forced me to be better at this than I was before. So, kudos to him for doing a great job with that.
So questions to ask a publicist. How would you know? Like, I'm trying to think of that as you're saying that, and I wouldn't even know where to begin.
You can Google it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That was going through my mind, but
yeah. Well, it would be things like, what kind of events are you interested in doing? Do you want to do live events? Do you want to take a teaching angle to your career, or do you want to just talk about your books? What kind of events do you want to do? Do you want to do TV events? Do you want to do Facebook events, Twitter events? How's your social media? Do you need to up your game on social media? What level do you want to be at? Like I told him, for me, for the first year, I don't want to be on anything big because I need to get my feet wet and I need to get better at this. So he said, okay, fine, we'll give you the smaller gigs to start with, and you work your way up as you get more comfortable with it. So And it depends on your experience. If you've got lots of experience, I'm sure he can put you into bigger events right away. I didn't have that experience, so I was quite happy to go to smaller events, which was just fine by me. I'm still happy with the smaller events because I'm not nervous. I find it's much more relaxing.
I did a CBC interview on the radio for my first novel.
Good for you.
Honestly, it was like the most nerve-wracking thing I think I've ever done. So it was a good job it was radio and nobody could actually see my face.
I did probably the, I shouldn't say funniest because it wasn't really very funny, but I did a TV gig with Mickey, and not with him, but he set it up. And so I thought it would be like other events where you spend the first 5 minutes talking to the host and just making sure your sound's okay and the picture's okay and that kind of thing. And so he comes on, he says something like, so what's your name? And I said, JP McLean. And that's it. But I was live and I didn't know it. Things that you learn, the things you learn. So he had a very boring introduction of what's your name? JP McLean. Nothing about where I live, what I write, how long I've been writing or anything. So yes, it's a learning process.
For sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure. So I just, I was reading that in Bloodmark, you have a character, I guess it's the best friend of the main character, named Sadie. And I have a character named Sadira in one of my books, and her nickname by her friends, you have to be her friend, otherwise she doesn't like you calling her, but call her Sadie as well. And I thought it was interesting that, and I've seen Sadie pop up now more often than I've ever heard it before, but I never heard of it until I actually wrote my character.
Wow.
And so that being said, when you're making these character names, is this something that you know the names, or do you, what conventions do you use to name your characters?
It's that's a big topic because
it is.
I don't use any names of people I know. So, the people that are in my family, you won't find their names in the book. But the name Sadie is simply a name I like. I like the name Sadie, and I think it's sassy. The name Emmeline is a woman that I knew in Vancouver. She was a lovely woman, and I really enjoyed her company. I'm not in touch with her now, but I always loved her name. So that's where the Emmeline came from. And then if I'm ever stuck for a name, like I try to make sure that my characters are reflective of society. So I'm not always familiar with Greek names or Italian names or other ethnicities. So I'll often go to research Google, ethnic names to get a nice combination that sounds good, first and last names. And the other thing that I do with names is I will sometimes go through a phone book, because phone books, and I keep phone books because those are people who are your neighbors, and those are, hopefully not your exact neighbors, but those names are names that are diverse and in your community. So I'll pick a name out of a phone book. And when I'm naming a villain, I'll often, not that I have a huge number of villains, but in the Gift Legacy series, the villain's name is Carson, one of the villains, Carson Mance. And I was thinking of Charles Manson. And I thought that's kind of a take on Charles Manson. I'm hoping that people, when they read that name in the back of their heads, they're thinking, or maybe subconsciously, Charles Manson's name's going to pop up when they see Carson Mance. So a lot of thought goes into names. And you have to make sure they're not all starting with the same letter. They're not all one-syllable names. They're not difficult to pronounce. And they represent the people that are living in your neighborhood. So that's my naming conventions.
Yeah, that's neat. My last series, I tried to make each letter of the alphabet for a different character.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So you get some problems with X's and Q's and stuff like that, but I made it work. So it's just kind of a fun thing to do as I was writing along.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also too in this latest book I had one of the guys I had him named Enrico Perez was the name that I had, and then I thought, oh wait a second, that wouldn't be an appropriate name for the particular gang he's in, so I had to go and look up another name. But in my head, he's still Enrico. It's really hard to change the name in your head once you've got that and you've started it. I did a search replace, and he's now Garvin. But geez, it's still in my head, Enrico, and every once in a while I'll type that. So thank God for editors.
Yeah, no doubt. Anita says the same letter thing gets me sometimes. Had to change a few names in the first drafts.
And the other thing was two names that are very similar. So in the very first editions of my books, Emmeline has a doctor who is named Emery. And in later editions, I switched his name out to Avery because it was way too close. And I didn't even see it.
It's funny you say that. I was just going to say that because in the series I'm writing now, the Queen has a horse called Failner. And then 2 books later, I introduced a Dwarf King. His name is Failin. And as I'm writing it, I keep putting Failner. So the Dwarf King becomes the horse. And my beta reader who jumps in and reads it before I've even finished the book, he's going, isn't that the horse? and I do it every time, and I know it. And then now when I'm editing myself, oh no, I named them after the horse again. So it's so close. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. The struggles we have as authors, for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I too have a beta reader, a number of them, and they've saved my bacon more than once because sure, you write a whole scene with the wrong character's name.
Yep. I actually published a book and had it. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on with our feed here. I actually published a book where the whole chapter was done from one character's point of view, but in one paragraph I started with another character who was halfway across the kingdom, had nothing to do with the scene, and I actually printed the book and sold them, and then someone pointed out to me, oh no. So that's the beauty of a first edition, I guess.
Yeah, and the beauty of being indie, you can go in and just
Oh, exactly. How it was changed.
You got to take advantages where you get them.
But some of them got out there, and then when I talked to people, I said, "Well, you've got that one-off book that's it's got the misprint in it. So hopefully someday it might be worth something for you."
My girlfriend got a copy of the thank you because she had beta read it for me, and the last page is upside down.
Yeah, I get my printer does that sometimes too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave, I'm monopolizing our guest here.
That's okay. No, I was just going to ask JP. Obviously, from what you said, you've lived in a lot of different places. Canada, Mexico, etc., etc. And I was just wondering, which has been the place that's kind of like been the most inspiring for your creativity? Do you think?
Vancouver. I love Vancouver. I mean, it's not that I don't love where I am now, but I set my books in Vancouver, and I think that's because Vancouver has so much to offer. You've got the ocean and sailing and motorboats, you've got harbors, you've got big cities, skyscrapers, mountains, skiing, you can see it all right from Vancouver. You can be in a hotel room and look and see people skiing up on the mountain and people down on the beach. And so I find that it gives me so much space, so much I can do within a story. The Secret Sky story, I think I took advantage of all of it. There was one book where it was all about boats and being on the water. There's another book where it's just like here on the coast, flying up and down the beaches, a lighthouse in one of the books. So all of that is primarily from living in Vancouver and so many things you can do there. So yeah, that would be the most inspirational book-wise. I mean, living-wise, I prefer to be where I am right now because it's just so quiet and nice, and I'm able to write and don't get very many interruptions. And thank goodness that the internet's getting better.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. You have good internet there for being on a little island.
We have Elon Musk. we've got Starlink right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's a satellite, but it's the only service that we can get delivered to our house is dial-up. So it's dish or dial-up.
And who would you say that were your favorite authors to actually read?
Oh, well, the one that I've just absolutely enamored of right now is Deborah Harkness, who wrote the trilogy about the witches. Oh, A Discovery of Witches is the first book, and it's been made into a series. And I've watched the first two seasons, the first two books, but I think the third one is on Sundance, and I don't get Sundance. I don't even know how to get Sundance, but I hope it eventually comes out in Netflix or Prime or one of those other ones. And the other author that I've been reading is Victoria Aveyard. And not only do I love her books, but she has quite a personality. I've been following her on Instagram. I'm not the one that you'll see on videos doing video stuff a little bit, but not very much. She's hilarious. She is just such a funny woman, and she's beautiful too. So that never hurts. But her books, she manages to get more superpowers in her books than I've ever imagined in my life. I cannot believe she could put that many. She's got a huge imagination. So kudos to her. I'm really enjoying her writing.
That's awesome. So I see we're coming to the end of the show, and before we go, what's next for JP McLean? Are we going back to this lady who we're not sure if she's dead or not, or
not yet?
Not yet. They're going to leave us in suspense, are you?
I'm writing the second Bloodmark book.
Okay.
So I'm writing the second, and I think there's going to be a third, and I'll probably continue writing that series until the third book is finished before I go back and write anything else. So that's what I'm on right now. I'm 27,000 words into it, so getting there.
And people looking for your books, where can they find them?
You can find everything through my website, jpmcleanauthor.com. There's links to everything there.
Sorry. I put your website on there and I missed that. Yeah, so I'll do that as we listen to Dave. So thank you for joining us, JP, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
It's been my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. So, Dave, just before we leave, what's new on the Dave Kelly Stratosphere?
Well, I'm still deep in the middle of editing my second Logan Two Feathers book, so I'm about halfway through the second draft on that. I've also been working on the second of my Aveyard Jones science fiction fantasy comedies, and also started writing the first chapter of a series which is going to come after all of those, which just came to me, and I just kind of had to write it down while it was there in my head. And at the same time, I've been doing some star mapping, creating maps of where all my stars are for the Aveyard Jones series. So been pretty busy.
That sounds like quite a job, trying to create a star map. Just from what I kind of know about the universes and stuff like that, there's an infinite amount, so it must be tough.
Yeah, it can be a lot of work for sure. How about you, Richard? What's new for you?
I don't know. We're still working on Windwalker. We're probably about 72,000 words into it right now. I've decided to. Someone asked me when I was selling books at the market the other day. He just knew my characters inside and out, and he mentioned this one character, and I hadn't written. I wrote this a few years ago, and he's just a little minor character. And he asked me a question about this character, and it took me a moment I'm thinking, who the heck is that character that he's talking about? I had one of those brain freezes where. And I felt so dumb because it's my book, it's my characters, but you get so many characters in your head. And I'm thinking, I wonder how many characters I actually have in all my, I've got 13 books out now, and I'm working on book 14. And so there's a lot of characters that kind of come in and then leave again. And, and then there's a bunch of unnamed characters that are, people that are just in the background, but I'm not even going to bother with them. So I've got an Excel spreadsheet open now, and I'm starting to take every character that I've written about and name them and just put a brief blurb about them so it's all on one sheet. And wow, it's amazing. I'll probably end up with about 200 characters at least. So yeah. And then I'm going to start doing that with pieces as well.
It's difficult when they're just walk-ons, isn't it? You know, I mean, like they kind of like they walk on, they say something, they walk off, and it's like
yeah. As long as they have a name, I'm going to categorize them. So you know, there are a bunch of characters.
That character might just happen to represent something special to them, and so they kind of like lock onto it. And yeah, you're kind of like, who is that?
Oh, it's for sure. It's all the little characters that, as long as they interact and have a name to them, I'm going to list them. So because there's a lot of characters just come in, say something, and leave just to advance the scene for whatever reason. But anyway, that's what's new with me. So next week is the inaugural live read episode, and Dave's really looking forward to this one. So starting on February 1st and the first Tuesday of every month from now on, we'll be dedicated to doing live reads from different authors' books. And we're going to ask the authors to join us and read an excerpt from their work. And we're going to join in the read with them. So they're going to assign us different characters in the scene, and the author can be the narrator. And so each of us assume a character role and reading along with them. As this is something new, I thought we'd start on February 1st just by reading from one of Dave's books and myself and see how it goes. And we may have a very special guest join us as well. And I haven't told Dave about this one yet. So I'll talk to him after the show's over. I don't want to spoil it. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I hope it will. So anyway, it should be a good time. And if anyone wishes to join us for a live read, and that includes you, JP McLean, please don't hesitate to contact Christy, Dave, or myself, and we'll make it happen. So it's a fun thing to do. I've done it with Christy before, and we just have a lot of fun. So I always tell Christy that I envision as Carol Burnett. She's Carol. I said, Dave's going to be Tim Conway, and I'll be Harvey Korman, and we're trying to make each other laugh as we're doing this at the same time. So I'm interested to see what kind of wig or something Dave will wear next week. So he's been known to do that before. Anyway, so that's all for tonight. So until we meet again, take good care, everybody.
Take good care. Good night.